You're listening to The Talent Sync. The Talent Sync is a talent board and job sync collaborative podcast production about anything and everything recruiting and hiring. Literally the kitchen sink on how all things in talent acquisition work together, should work together, and how sometimes they don't. Now it's time to sync up with your hosts, Kevin Grossman and Leah Daniels. Today's topic is recruiting, hiring, and compliance. Oh my. Enjoy the podcast. Leah, how are you doing this fine day?
How are you? I am feeling great because I've been sick all week I'm blaming the weather. You were going to tell me it's like science-based.
No, it's not cold. Cold doesn't give you colds. Viruses and bacteria give you colds. But I hear you though. You've had some pretty intense swings of temperature.
Yeah, we visited both the negative 10 degree range and the positive 50 degree range in a 24-hour period of time. Like we were both Alaska. I checked online the current temperature of the North Pole on Saturday last weekend, and it was warmer than it was here in Boston. It was warmer in the North Pole than it was in Boston. And I was like, that's it. I need to move. And then by Sunday, it was 50.
You know, I totally feel for you because I live in the West, in California, in the Bay Area. And for us, though, when it gets down below 40 in the morning, which it has been, that's cold for us. I mean, my wife's got a parka on inside the house when the heater's on out there for us. So that's chilly, but it's been getting now in the low 60s during the day. So that's mild, which we can deal with. And it didn't give me a cold.
Wow. All right.
You can't, but you're feeling better though.
I am feeling better. I did test every day for COVID and for flu. It was neither. And so I have said that I had fluvid, which is neither COVID nor flu, but feels like both.
Fluvid. When at the beginning of the year, after we came back from the hordes at Disneyland, I did get a little grungy. I got a little grungy, but then I was just at a conference last week in San Diego that went really well. TA Week, great conference. I had the only sold out workshop. Proud to say that. It was very nice. I had a great group in there, even with some technical issues, which is another story, but really it went off really well. But I was worried that I'd come back and be at this point a week later to kind of be grungy again. Cause things are going around right now, but no, so far so good that has been the case.
So I traveled this week too, and I masked up because in my head decided that you get sick on airplanes. Again, this is not fact-based, but it just feels like that's where you're going to get sick. So I've just decided I'm going to mask up on my planes and try to stay healthy and do the best I can. You know
what? I don't disparage anybody that does that. I mean, I've still been doing it off and on depending on where I'm at, and especially on a plane. It's a closed space. There's airborne things are easily ingested in you. So, there's a reason why, I don't want to digress too much, obviously, but there's a reason why many different Asian cultures, why they've been wearing masks for decades on planes, right?
Because they're smarter than we are.
Well, that's exactly right. But we want to build that immunity. That's okay. So we're going to segue into, I'm kind of calling this episode Recruiting, Hiring, and Compliance. Oh my. And a little story, and then I know you're going to share something too that kind of segue into the topic that we want to talk for a little bit today on, is that, so my daughter recently, my oldest, she completed an online babysitting course. She has an affinity for watching kids. She's been a junior leader at day camp. She's only 14, so she can't get paid yet for this stuff. Oh, well, babysitting, yes, but not for being at a camp. But anyway, so she took an online babysitting course, finally finished it and did really well, passed it. So she's very excited. And so some of our friends that have younger kids, we've been kind of pitching her. And one of my wife's best friends who runs a preschool said, well, have Beatrice, that's my daughter's name, put together a resume. We haven't done that with her before, and it's kind of fun being in the space that we're in, that I'm in, and in recruiting and hiring. And so I sat down with her. This was a dad thing, and it was fun. And I helped her put it together. And I was, saying, let's put your experience down. So we got it all done and got it finished. And she was like, but I can't put that down. And I'm like, well, that's very applicable, that experience information, when you were a camp leader at a day camp. Anyway, long story short, we finished it, got it out the door, but it got me thinking about the least glamorous part of recruiting and hiring, especially for job candidates, and I would argue even for TA folks, is the application process.
The application process. Yeah, for sure.
The application process. So it got me thinking about that and what's to come for her, the not fun parts. Even though we know there are companies that we work with at Talent Board that have done a much better job improving that experience or across the candidate journey, but it's still the least glamorous part of recruiting and hiring. And you were going to remind me of something that...
It's not just the least glamorous. It's also set up in a way that's kind of interesting, right? Candidates don't fully understand the gauntlet we're putting them through. They're like, what? Okay. And I was talking to an attorney yesterday. We did a webinar, and she said, candidates will give up pretty much anything that you ask because they need that job, right? Especially if in certain groups of people, they will answer any question you put in front of them, whether or not you should be asking or not. They'll go through it. And so I was remembering the very first time that Kevin, you and I got in like a really good discussion. That's the best way I can describe it. It wasn't a debate by any stretch, because we were not on two sides of an opinion, but we were coming at a problem from two different perspectives. And you were really focused on the candidate experience and how do we make that candidate experience simpler, easier, makes more sense, streamlined, all of the good things for candidate experience. And I just remember saying the challenge with candidate experience is that candidates don't appreciate the regulations and regulatory requirements that companies have on the other side. Why am I answering for the 26th time today if I want to provide my gender or my race or my veteran status? Like, why is this happening? Like, why do I have to do this? Because the reality is that none of those things can be considered as part of your application process, but they all must be asked by the company, and the candidate has no idea why.
In fact, it's interesting that you say that, because, and that was our discussion. And the one thing that I remember admitting, I'm like, for all these years of talking about improving the overall recruiting and hiring process as it relates to the candidate experience. And we talk a lot to companies about collapsing the application stage as much as you can. And what is the minimum amount of information that I need to get people in the door? Then you had brought up the fact, but then there are these things that have to be, from a compliance perspective, have to be adhered to. And I thought, that's true. And you're right. Candidates don't understand and don't care. One of the questions that we do ask when we ask candidates in our research, what did you do during the application stage? And we did ask them, one of the answer choices was the capturing of this information. I can't remember the exact wording of it because I don't have it pulled up in front of me right now, but about what's the protection? I know I'm totally drawing a blank right now, but what you just referenced, like about...
Like the EEO.
Well, it's the EEOC, but I mean, it's like, I'm asking, the reason why I'm asking you for gender.
So you're required to ask this information if you're a company over 100 employees in the U.S. or if you take any sort of government funding whatsoever, I think in excess of $100,000. So you would have to ask these questions because the EEO is looking to make sure that you are reporting that you are practicing anti-discrimination, or at least non-discriminatory efforts in your hiring practices or in your candidate acquisition practices. And so they're looking at this data, which you're self-reporting on an annual basis, to help them understand what's happening with the hiring practice in the U.S. And what's interesting is that candidates don't have to answer these questions. They're all voluntary. Companies have to present them. But there's another element that's really interesting, which is how the system you're using provides that questionnaire and those questions to the candidate. So like, you don't have to answer these questions, except that a lot of the systems provide a do not disclose answer, which is actually the answer. So it's still required, even though you're choosing not to answer, but you're answering because you're choosing. It's very confusing.
It is. And here's and sorry, to get the exact verbiage, because I actually pulled it up. of what we asked the candidates to tell us about what happened during the application. So a couple of related questions to what you're talking about include, I was given the reason for requesting race, gender, veteran status, etc. in terms that I could understand. That does not happen very often.
What I learned yesterday that I think is actually really important is that it's upon the company to make sure it's clear to the candidate the difference between questions they're being asked that are considered for their employment and questions they're being asked due to regulatory government data collection efforts. And you actually should go as far as to ensure that those happen on different pages of the application. And what I was realizing, Kevin, is that there are a number of ATSs in their efforts to streamline this process that now present the entire application on one single screen, including those questions. And I sort of sat there, and these are some big name ATSs. We're not going to name and shame today, but these are some big name ATSs that they're not considering this, and companies do not have the flexibility in their systems to make that alteration. So here they are potentially in kind of some hot water you can get into if candidates cannot distinguish, and that in turn makes certain disadvantaged groups of candidates not apply.
Time for a talent sync break.
Hey everybody, Kevin Grossman here, president of Talent Board and the Candidate Experience Awards. Our 2023 Candidate Experience Benchmark Research Program will open in January and run through August 31st. To learn more on how your organization can participate, go to thetalentboard.org. Is that all on the ATS though? Because isn't that part, part of this is driven by their own customers too, right? To simplify.
Why wouldn't why wouldn't you give the flexibility to have at least some patentization?
Well, I agreed, right? If I'm a company that, because again, this is a best practice that we've touted for a long time. Again, collapse as much as I can to get the minimal amount of information, including any compliance questions that need to be asked, whether I have to answer them or not, that they're clear, they're understood. I have the reason why I'm being asked that in the most clap fashion. I mean, the ATSs should be the advocate for that too with their customers, right?
One would think. So I got a phone call yesterday afternoon. So I had this conversation in the morning. I did this little webinar. It was fun. And then I got a phone call later on from a VP of talent acquisition from a company I work with. And she said the following words to me. She's like, I got off this webinar and I was talking to the CHRO and I was explaining to her that you guys were trying to help us understand all the different regulations out there, because it's not just the EEOC and the OFCCP collections, right? We are also now as recruiters having to worry about TCPA, right? Have we gotten the right to text people? We need to worry about GDPR with California Consumer Privacy Act is now part of recruiting. Even if you think it's not, because it's the word consumer in there, you're like, oh, that's not us. No, it's us. And then pay transparency. And now there's AI laws. This is getting complicated. And so she said, her and the CHRO are talking, and CHRO said, how are we supposed to keep up with this? Just how? And honestly, I don't have a good answer for her. Like, that is a really hard thing for our recruiting teams to keep up with. You need a dedicated attorney.
Right, you do. You also need, well, you have to depend. I'm just thinking you have to depend on your partners here too. They have to help you stay in the know, because what you want to avoid is you want to avoid the EEOC knocking on your door because that you had complaints filed for whatever reason. And I've got some numbers that we can share and talk about, and the states in particular that are unfortunate violators, including my own in California. It's the biggest number of sexual harassment complaints is one of like 8 states, and then the same thing with just other EEOC violations that have been filed in the past few years in the trends. But anyway, I would think that they have to have they got to have help from legal counsel, but they also I just would think that their tech stack partners need to be in the know. And it just feels like if that person told you that, play that out over and over again.
And this is of a company of size. So they have counsel, right? This is a company that at least has in-house counsel. You think about many companies which are smaller, mid-sized, that don't have in-house counsel, or they have a single person who is in-house counsel. So there's no specialization in these things. They're trying to be everything to everyone in the organization. It's a big job. How do you keep track of all these things? And, Kevin, you just said something really interesting, which is your vendors should be helping you. And you're right, except I had a number of conversations with AI vendors leading up to the new year around, what are you guys going to do about this New York law?
Right, which has been pushed out, by the way. It's actually been
Well, yeah, enforcement's been pushed out, which is good because
but it's only pushed out to April. So, because companies have no idea, everybody's going at it. They don't know what to do.
And I had more than one AI vendor say to me, "Well, we're not really AI."
Well, right. Well, I know because I know it's funny and not at the same time because we know that that's been the marketing message, right, to date, and now, and so I mean, but it's not. But yet, I interviewed Keith Sonderling last year. He spoke at our conference. His whole tour that he did last year was all about the cautions of utilizing AI-related smart technologies in your recruiting and hiring efforts. And he wasn't all outright against them. He's just cautioning companies, you need to make sure that you are doing these things, reducing bias, and that there's a fairness aspect and all the things that the EOC looks at. That was his whole tour, the whole time that he did this. It is going to be interesting to see what kinds of cases do come up for the EEOC in the next 1 to 3 years once this starts getting enforced, maybe in New York and elsewhere, like the pay transparency laws that we talked about in the last episode too, or the first episode.
And I think, again, this is another one. It's not just do you have to put it in your posting or not requirement. That one actually is the easiest of all of them. It's all the other states, especially if you're hiring remote or you're hiring nationally, you have to have a better understanding of every single individual state law. Well, who can you do what? Or maybe the better solution is go with a generalized set of practices that simply you don't ask candidates what they're currently making. You do post your salary range. You don't try to put yourself in a position where you have to know each state individually. Instead, you set guidelines that allow you to be compliant across the U.S. I mean, I think that's what you have to do as a company. But I do think that they're struggling. And I think they're struggling because posting, as we talked about the other day, right? Posting those pay ranges when you already have an existing workforce who may not be within it means you are going to be confronted with a problem. Like you have to solve that first problem of your current workforce. And so, yeah, I think it's tough, right? And I think coming up with common standards for your business that make you compliant at least nationally, because when you start to go internationally and you're dealing with GDPR, it gets even more complicated.
The past 2 years, I have also, this has come up in different webinars that we've done, like with sponsors and other related topics, when we start talking about, again, AI related technologies and, are they screening out under other underrepresented groups? Are they inclusive of them, or are they actually screening them out? And I know the EEOC, based on this new, what are they calling it? The SEP, which is the Strategic Enforcement Plan that they're going to potentially put into place this year through 2027 or later this year, the fiscal year 2023. Anyway, is going to really even more so focus on those what they call vulnerable and underserved. That includes people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, neurodivergent folks across the spectrum, people with arrest or conviction records, LGBTQI individuals, plus individuals, temporary workers, older workers, people in low wage jobs, and people with limited English proficiency, which we know, I think, unfortunately, right, the reality, Leah, is that in mainstream recruiting, hiring, and the way that, especially in the States, probably globally too, a lot of those folks do get screened out. Unfortunately, I'm making a blanket statement, I know, and I'm sure that I'm not trying to challenge a lot of the providers that have been really trying to reduce bias and make their tools and resources and platforms more inclusive. I'm sure that's the case, but it's going to be even more so under the radar.
Time for a Talent Sync break.
Hi, Talent Sync listeners. I just wanted to share a bit about JobSync with you all. JobSync helps companies get more quality candidates out of their job board advertising and automates a variety of manual recruitment tasks by solving for the very low conversion rate challenges most companies experience on their career site. JobSync integrates your entire application, including all of your questions, directly into the various job boards' quick apply processes, providing you with fully completed applications directly into your ATS and resulting in 2 to 5 times more candidates while dropping your cost per application by half. This helps return up to 10 hours a week back into your recruiter's time through custom automations that are based on your business-specific recruiting processes. JobSync works with most major ATSs like Workday, SuccessFactors, and Taleo, CRMs, programmatic platforms, and job boards like Indeed and Zip. You can check out jobsync.com to learn more.
Yeah, I think that the challenge with the AI and the machine learning component is really about show your work, right? At the end of the day, helping recruiters be more efficient, skills matching, identifying the best candidate in a I get it. It makes total sense. And I get the sense from Keith Sutherland. Did I say his name right?
It's Keith Sonderling.
Sonderling. From what I've heard of him in his speaks, in his, the different speeches he's done, he's not against AI, right? He really does think that there's a huge benefit to the hiring practice in the United States if we get it right, but we got to get it right. I think that's the big deal. So how do you show your work? And I think it's really hard for a lot of the true AI vendors to show their work because you can't necessarily show how you got there with machine learning, and you've got big databases that you can't show because it's all anonymized. There's a bunch of challenges that come along with this AI piece, and I think I think we could go for days talking about how do you navigate this in a world where if you're an attorney or you're an individual, the thing you know about AI is that Amazon produced an entire report on how they used AI, and they biased their hiring practices with it.
Was that pre-COVID?
Yeah, I think it was like 2016, 2017. I don't remember.
I think it
exactly.
was a few years ago. That was a few years ago now.
It was.
But you're right though. They did actually, and they came out and said it didn't quite work.
It didn't work.
Right. Or it excluded people.
Yeah, it excluded the wrong people. And for the wrong reasons. And, they found themselves getting to a point where they had a more and more white male, and, some Indian men and some Asian men, but that was it. And they were excluding pretty much the rest of the population. And they admitted it. We did this experiment. It didn't work. And here we're giving you all the data on it. But when you're a person who just got rejected, you don't know why you got rejected. You looked at the thing, you said, 6 skills. I have those 6 skills. Why did I get rejected? Right? They don't know. They don't know. And you and I both know that there's a whole bunch of things that go into whether or not you get picked. One of which is, are you first or second or third, right? If you are in early, you have just a better chance of being seen. If you are the 700th person to apply to that job, or they're going to make one hire, you might just not get seen. And it has nothing to do with your qualifications.
No, but are you talking about the automated selection now, or are you talking about humans?
Oh, I'm saying, as a candidate, you don't know. Is there a human on the other side? Is there an automated selection on the other side?
No, right.
You don't know.
Right.
And even if it is an automated selection, it may have automated to a point. It might still be reordering the match rate, but the recruiter has moved into another phase of the recruiting process, right? The job is not closed. It's still accepting candidates, but you've got 7 people interviewing. So you're not actually looking at what's coming in now because you don't have time.
No, you don't. And that's, the timing of how long those positions, even if I am in the final running and maybe we're making offers to somebody, that unfortunately, a lot of companies inadvertently leave those jobs up and open for way too long, even after they've been filled, for that matter. And that's
the ATSs, the vendors don't make it easier. Some of the vendors will allow you to close the job internally while leaving it posted on your career site. Not that anyone meant to do that, but they did. And so it really gets dicey with how candidates perceive that, because the candidate doesn't know that you have closed that job internally. The candidate doesn't know that 700 people have applied ahead of them. They just don't know these things.
Just a quick segue, and I'm trying to figure out how to thread the needle here with us on this for people that are going to listen to this. But I think when I just wanted for the last bit of this particular episode, talking about fairness, right? I mean, obviously it's important. A lot of these regulations that have been put into place are supposed to be protections for those whether they're Americans with disabilities. I'm talking about specifically North America and America, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the Equal Pay Act, these are all supposed to be protections, Title VII cases for individuals that have historically been marginalized or literally discriminated against, unfortunately continue to be so. But there is it's hard for me, being a white male, to see this reaction, because I'm not in that camp of when we're bringing people up to a point of equity and equality. And I'm thinking of it from the recruiting and hiring lens too, right? That the group that had been there historically for a long time feels that they are now the ones that are being discriminated against. And I see posts like this, and there is no data that I have found to validate this. It's perception, unfortunately. And it's really hard. But when I relate it to the candidate experience in our research, that these groups in our data and research the past 2 years in particular have had some of the highest positive candidate ratings versus the groups that I'm referring to now. And I think that's because there's been more movement. There's more employer branding, recruitment marketing for those groups. But there's also, hopefully better protections. I mean, cases are not going away for compliance violations, unfortunately, and including the state that I'm in and Texas and Georgia and Florida.
Yeah, I think the compliance piece is actually probably the violation reporting may actually go up, right? I think that's because people are feeling that they are actually being heard and that there's going to be repercussions, which I think maybe there was a concern of that before. Now we feel like we are actually empowered to make those reports and say this is happening and this is not okay. But I think there is actually one word that matters in all of this, right? Transparency brings you so far along. Right. So pay transparency. I've been reading the reports. I think it was somewhere in Europe where the result was that the white guys ended up getting $2 less an hour while everyone else came up to, meet them in the middle. Right. So pay transparency balanced. And so there's over time this concern that we actually have wage depression on one group in order to have wage inflation in the rest of those groups of people. And I think that isn't a bad thing, except for those people who think it is a bad thing. But it's really about being transparent about how you're getting there, right? So to the degree, do you remember this? Sorry, just so we wrap up here, but do you remember LinkedIn? And I don't know if they still do this, but when you used to apply to a job on LinkedIn, they would tell you how many other people had applied to that job. It was one of my favorite features. I love that because I feel like as a candidate, you're like, you knew I'm one of 100. I'm one of one, right? I'm getting a call back. I'm one of one.
I haven't tested that recently, so I don't know if that's something that still happens if you do apply on LinkedIn. But it is good to know. It's also could be disheartening to know if 700 people applied.
At least it gets your expectations in line, right? Where I feel like the black hole of applying is often due to the fact that you don't have anyone setting your expectations, so you're setting your own. I've applied to this job. I met all the qualifications. Why are they not calling me?
Leah, the transparency, I agree with you with that word. And I think that, we have all these guardrails and laws and regulations in place to protect us, to protect the job candidates, to protect employers. But transparency definitely can lead to a lot more, I think, equity and potentially equality down the line. It's one of the biggest tenets that we see in our research. When candidates feel that it was more of a transparent process, they do feel like it was more fair and it was more positive overall. Even if they didn't get the job at the end of the day, at least they knew this is what happened. This is why we made the decision. Generally speaking, usually at the point of application, people aren't qualified enough to be screened. Most of them aren't. So I agree. I think transparency is the word of the day. What they're going to do, we're going to start doing like a Sesame Street thing on the show. That is the word. And we're going to spell it and we're going to do I think so. This is great. I think we got to wrap now because, you and I could keep going forever and ever, but it's been, I think, a great episode. I mean, again, we talked about a lot of things that relate to that, but I agree. I think transparency is a good word.
I think it's a great word. And I think it covers this topic and so many more. But even with regulations, oh my, be transparent about why you're collecting it, right? Be transparent. Just it's such a helpful term. Anyway, I love it. Nice to see you, Kevin.
Yeah, you too, Leah. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next show, all right?
Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to the Talent Sync podcast, a Talent Board and Job Sync collaborative podcast production. More episodes soon.